So thank you all for joining us for tonight's webinar on curriculum, accommodations, and modifications in special education on Tuesday, December 8th. Our guest presenters, Eleni Burd and Tierra Brown, with Include Me from the ARC of PA. Our disclaimer, the ARC of Lehigh, Northampton County's Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any others provided by the ARC's Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply the endorsement, recommendations, or favorings of the providing party or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. Thank you for letting me share that. And now I would like to introduce our guest presenters, Eleni and Tierra Brown from the ARC of PA Include Me program. So buckle up for this fun interactive webinar tonight. The Zoom is yours.
All right, seatbelts on, right? All arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. All right, thank you so much for having us. I think the coffee finally kicked in, so we're ready to go.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. You're going to notice the title's a little different, but that was a mistake on my end. So we are going with our curricular accommodations and modifications, which are both types of adaptations. So first, I want to say that, of course, everyone is welcome here. This is a safe space, so bring us your questions, judgment-free. If you need to do anything, whatever you need to do to take care of your needs as a human being, please feel free to do that. So if I see you with your spaghetti, I'm probably just going to be jealous. So let's dig into it. So I am Eleni Burd. I am an Include Me specialist. I have about 16 years in community organizing and nonprofit leadership, so a lot of grassroots stuff around the Lehigh Valley. So it's definitely always where my heart has been. I have 12 years, in this field as both a paraprofessional in the classroom, a direct support professional in the community, and a few other, places in between. So and of course, I have a 10-year-old who I just happens to think is like the coolest kid in the world. And he participates in a lot of our programming. So if your kiddos participate, you might have seen him at some point be bopping around in his Zoom screen, like the screensavers, on the TV with the DVD. Yeah, that's usually him when we're on Zoom. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-presenter, Tierra, and my regional partner, my right-hand person.
Yeah, I would like to co-sign that. Her son is so cool. So I just wanted to give that. He's amazing. My name is Tierra Brown. As Eleni said, I'm her regional partner here in Lehigh for Include Me. I'm actually from Virginia, but I've been in PA. Now it's 5 years. When we did this slide, it was not 5 years. So now it's 5 years. The valley is really amazing. I'm from the beach, but I love the mountains are great. You guys have a lot of flash floods. It's very interesting, but I love this area. I have a bachelor's in psychology. I want to go back and get my master's in social work or sociology. So we'll see when Uncle Sam wants to pay my loans if I can go back. I have done work as a direct support professional for adults with ID, but most of my inclusion work comes in with working with kids in foster care. So I have like that kind of spectrum of stuff. Unlike Eleni, I'm a plant mom because I don't have any physical children. I have a lot of plants. I have about 50 plants. They are struggling because my depression's struggling, but they're alive. And so we're going to take that as a plus. We can keep them alive. And they're really encouraging to remind you that even if you're struggling, there's growth. So I love that. And we're just super excited to be here with you guys. So hopefully you can feel that energy.
All right, so let's dig in. Okay, so this next slide is more for when we do this in school districts, and then they're getting PD hours for it. We have to, display our objectives, but we're gonna just continue along because we want to get to the good stuff. All right, so what are curricular adaptations? So when a student has an IEP an individualized education program, or a 504 plan, you'll probably hear that word accommodation quite a bit. So you might also hear school staff members saying modification. So while the two words sound very similar, they mean very, very, very different things. So there are two ways to provide that academic support in the classroom, that accommodations, I think are mirrored, so I might be pointing the wrong way, and modifications. So accommodations are, by definition, changes in the how of how a student is accessing information and how they're demonstrating learning. And it changes the way that student works within their capabilities to complete those tasks. So that's the accommodation. So modifications, on the other hand, are what they're learning. So it's changes to what a student is expected to learn and what they're expected to demonstrate. So let's talk a little bit about some common types of both of these. So let's start with accommodations. So some presentation, or one of the most common types of accommodations is presentation accommodation. So that changes the way that the information is presented to the student, and it in a way that best suits their needs. So that includes visuals, audiobooks, verbal instruction instead of printed or written instructions, or the other written instructions instead of verbal instructions. It might include reading bigger print or fewer items on a page. So these are different presentation accommodations where the same information is being presented, but in a different way. So a lot of times we see more visuals and things like that. The next one is going to be response accommodation. So that is changing the way that students are expected to complete their assignments and their tests. So that can be include spoken, written, or typed formats. So a lot of times we see a student who might be able to use text to speech, or they might be able to use we're going to go into some of these examples yet, so I don't want to steal Tierra's thunder, but so a lot of those different ways of showing what they know. Next is those setting accommodations. So these are really, really, really common. So this changes things about that environment that the student is completing the tasks in. So sometimes that might be changing the group size, or the room, or the lighting, or the acoustics, or the use of sensory tools. So that's changing that environmental experience for the student to better be able to perform. After that, we have timing and scheduling. So this is one that I think is an undersung option. So this changes like how long a student gets to complete a test or an assignment, but also how they're scheduled. So a lot of times this comes into play when we see students who might have, medication side effects, where they get really sleepy after a dose of a lunch medicine. And maybe that's not the best time for them to be working on their most challenging, subjects. So talking about those scheduling flexibilities and things like that. And last, and this is something that my son's IEP is about to be even more beefed up with, is these organizational skills, and those accommodations for organizational skills, because we're headed to middle school next year, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little scared. So this can include things like timers. This can include things like different planning tools, and especially self-assessment tools, which is one of my absolute favorite things to talk about. And hopefully we get to kind of dig into that a little bit. If not, I have resources to share if you're interested. So that is just accommodation. So that's just changing how students access information and how they show us what they know. Now let's talk a little bit more about modifications. So that's changing what that expectation is for what they're actually learning. So this is can be assignment modifications. So maybe the student is completing different homework problems than their peers, or maybe they're creating an alternate project or assignment, right? So those are some modifications to the assignment, where curriculum modifications might include learning, from different materials, or learning different materials, such as learning or continuing to work on multiplication while classmates move on to fractions. Or that might mean getting graded or assessed using a different standard than other students, like a different rubric or different scale altogether. So these are some of the different curriculum modifications that we can see. So it's important to remember that these strategies, no matter what type of accommodation or modification they are, always should be defined by the IEP, and that discussion with the IEP team should always happen before introducing anything new. And I know that that more applies to the student teams that we're talking to, but it's also it's important that teams understand, the importance of the parent voice as part of that IEP team. So that's something that I think is, and I know I'm preaching to the choir because we have a great group of parents here already. So that's just a little bit on accommodations and modifications. So we have our how, we have our what. So just to make sure we all are there together, let's do a quick activity where I'm going to read some different scenarios, and you're going to tell me whether that is an accommodation, or if we're making adjustments to the how, or if it's a modification where we're making adjustments to the expectation. So I'm going to give some examples, and you're going to tell me, so you can either drop it in the chat if that's your thing, or we can, I was going to do reactions, but I'm making it more complicated. So let's just drop in the chat which one you think it is. Okay. So we have a student, Emery, who has cerebral palsy, and she has difficulty with tasks that involve fine motor skills, such as turning the pages of a book. So she is allowed to use e-texts instead of the physical textbooks used by her fellow classmates. So is that an accommodation or a modification? And you can just put A or M, because I would be losing my mind if I had to spell those words over and over again. So just, you can shortcut it. But yeah, absolutely. So accommodations, great, awesome. All right, so next up is our friend Cody. So Cody loves to tell stories, but he has a hard time putting words down on paper. So when his teacher assigns a 2-page paper, she allows Cody to write 1 or 2 paragraphs instead. So is Cody receiving an accommodation or a modification? Right, I see some people saying modification, and I'm sure we're going to have some overlap that tends to happen. Yeah, so we're changing that expectation for Cody, right? He is not being held to that same standard of length, where that's the focus there. So that would be a modification for him. So let's talk a little bit more. We'll just do a couple of these. So Daniel is deaf, and a sign language interpreter accompanies him to his classes and relays all the information that the teacher presents. So is that an accommodation or a modification? Yeah. So for having a pretty neutral knowledge coming into this, y'all seem pretty much like experts to me. So I'm gonna do, let's do one more and then we'll move on, because I feel like you guys got this. All right, so Anya has a learning disability. As such, she has difficulty processing the information her teacher covers in class, and consequently taking good notes. To help her be successful, the teacher provides her with a study guide for each lesson. Yeah, this is a tricky one. So is that an accommodation or a modification? I swear it's not a trick question. All right, so we're a little bit split, but it is an accommodation, right? Because she is accessing that information in a written way instead of an audio or a verbal translation.
It would be a modification because this happened to my daughter. If the study guide did not have the complete study guide as everybody else, her questions are shortened, then it would be a modification. So because I know that's a tricky one for parents are thinking, well, wait a minute, is that a modification? I'm getting it. And it depends on how the study guide is written.
Exactly. And that's exactly what, we're going to get into in a little bit is that, it really has to do with that content and how much we're, is it essentialized? Like, are we just taking the highlights of it? Or are they accessing the same amount of information as their peers? So that's that thing is, it can be visual, it can be verbal, it can be written, whatever combination of these things, as long as it's the same amount of information that's being given. So that is absolutely the most important part. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. I want to take a step back and I want to talk a little bit more about the bigger picture of some of the stuff. So Max von Manen, and I know this is more for, when we do this with teachers, but I think it's important, to bring this understanding into our conversations with teachers. But so teachers in the most exciting and effective differentiated classes don't have all the answers. What they do have is optimism and determination. They are dogged learners that come to school every day with the conviction that today will reveal a better way of doing things. Even if yesterday's lesson was dynamite, they believe they can find this better way. So in the same way that this is, can invigorate a teacher, I think it's also really important to, as we're building those relationships between home and classroom, that we're always remembering that we're all in this to learn together and to grow together. And sometimes accommodations and modifications can be scary to teams, especially if it's something they're unfamiliar with. And to go into those conversations, with that optimism and determination. So, all right. So intelligence is variable and it's multifaceted. So the brain is malleable. So just like muscles, when we're pumping iron and doing all that kind of stuff, that the neurons grow and they develop when they're used. So a new neural pathway needs that repetition, just like that working out to build the muscle. So we really have to be vigorous with new learning or we risk students losing brain power. So can you think of a time that you didn't work on, a part of your brain like a muscle or a skill or something like that, and it was rusty when you came back to it, right? So maybe you have a skill that you stopped doing for a period of time and you needed to refresh it a little bit. I'm a roller skater. I don't know if you saw that in some of my intro pictures, but I had knee surgery about 2 years ago. And I tell you what, that is a use it or lose it skill I have learned. It really was one of my rusty bits that needed some help getting back. But that's the same way with our brains. So can you think of well, let me back up a little bit here. So brain's hunger for meaning and connecting to that meaning to learn it, oh my goodness gracious, connecting meaning to learning is as important as moving that muscle to keep it from atrophy. So the curriculum needs to be meaningful and it needs to be high interest. We need to know that most people, we know that this room, or this virtual room is, doesn't have control over what that curriculum looks like in the classroom. But encouraging teachers to weave that student interest into lessons is a win-win situation. So, how can we get students to buy into their learning, for lack of a better word? How can we make it meaningful? And how can we connect it with what they're learning, in their world? One thing that I think about, one of the students that we're working with this year, his family has a lawn care business, and we hadn't known that before we connected with the family, and learned that he loves taking stuff apart and putting it back together. And this dude is a kindergartner, so that was really impressive to me. So we learned that, some of those supports that we'll talk about a little later, when they were mechanical in nature, they were really, really super engaging to him. So weaving in that student interest is always a win-win.
If I can interject, Eleni.
Really?
I also think about a student we were working with last year, and this is an Eleni story, but I'm going to just throw it out there because I thought it was really great. Just needed help being motivated to work on task specifically with a math or something, I believe. And so he was just not very motivated. So Eleni he loves Roblox. I don't know if you know what that is, but the kids are really into it lately. It's a video game. They can talk to each other, but they play a lot of games. But you get an avatar, and his favorite color was pink. So Eleni made him a paper doll character that anytime he created or finished a task, he could decorate it and change like the hair or change the clothes, add trinkets to it. And it was a way to motivate him and help him be motivated to work on his task and complete it. And he loves Roblox, and it was a hit. So yes.
Thank you. I always forget about that one for some reason, because it was so much fun to make. But if anyone wants a tutorial on how to do this, I'm more than willing. So let me know. All right. So yeah, I think, weaving that student interest in is where it's at. If we all know that if our kids are not interested in what you have to say, they're not going to be listening to you. And that's as simple as it is. So let's talk a little bit about, so I think one of the best ways to understand a student better and really to be able to connect with them in their world is to see how they prefer to learn and interact with new ideas. Now, this is one of the hills I'll die on, because there's a lot of outdated information when it comes to this. So let's talk a little bit more about, usually when I hit the arrow, it works. There we go. I want to talk a little bit more about multiple intelligences and learning styles. So I know a lot of people talk about Gardner's multiple intelligences, and it's important to have a deeper understanding of the concept. And I know I usually get a little too in the weeds with this one. So you see this image on the left that has the 9 types of intelligence, and the words are tiny. So I'm going to read through them real quick just to make sure that we know what they are. So at the top, we have naturalist, which is that like understanding of the natural world. We have musical, we have logical and mathematical. We have existential, interpersonal, bodily kinesthetic, linguistic, intrapersonal, and spatial. Now, normally I would want to kind of break down what each of these mean, but I want to tell you that the purpose of multiple intelligences was to challenge the thought of IQ being a single measure of a person's intelligence. So this was Gardner's way of saying, human intelligence can be housed in a lot of different spaces. But a lot of times when this comes into the educational sphere, we forget a little bit that we can't quite assign that in the way that it has been assigned. So what Gardner has actually said, or a lot of critics, argue that his definition of intelligence is too broad, and that they just simply represent, talents or traits and abilities. But even Gardner kind of cautioned that it should not be conflated with learning styles, which we see on the other side of the screen, the right side. It's also important because I'm a nerd. I'm not gonna lie. I love research. I could spend days on JSTOR and be perfectly content. But evidence has found that matching instruction style to a learner's perceived style doesn't have benefit in terms of learning outcomes and educational attainment. So learning styles emphasize the different ways that people think and feel as they solve problems. So the theory of multiple intelligence is an effort to understand how cultures and disciplines shape human potential. So that's a really out there explanation. But a lot of times, when we're looking at these different accommodations and these different, ways of giving students the flexibility to show what they know and to understand these things in different presentations or different presentation accommodations, it can be easy to pigeonhole kids to really have kids married to one style and not give the opportunity to really understand a fuller, approach to a problem. So I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. So while a student's self-identified learning style or multiple intelligence can be an access point to material, multimodality should always be the goal. So we always want that, learning from different places, having all of those different ways to interact with learning. All right, so I know that was like a big sidebar. So we're gonna continue on. But I think, as we keep talking about this, it'll be important to kind of think about not just which of these learning styles that match our kid, but which learning styles can we start to grow? Which ones are we going to start to incorporate to really expand, their repertoire. Okay. All right, so can learning cause confusion? So a lot of times we are, guilty of trying to solve those problems for students because watching our kids struggle is hard. And oftentimes it's helpful, but there's times where it's not. And is it okay to sit in that discomfort for a bit in order to learn something new? So this is something that I struggle with a lot as a parent, especially when, you see the effect of frustration on your kids. But building the ability, that resilience and that ability to struggle is what that's about. So before I tangent anymore on my caffeine tirade, let's keep on keeping on. So I want to, we're just going to watch a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And a lot of times what true learning comes from the unexpected or confusion. So confusion and some struggle can lead to complete understanding. And those light bulb moments often happen after we connect new knowledge to old knowledge and get past the confusion. So this video, so a lot of it has to do with like a tapping technique that I'm not really that familiar with, but it's supposed to help you like sit in frustration. We're not going to watch that, but if you're interested in that, we can share that resource in case you're wondering what else she's talking about that we are skipping. All right.
Hello. So
Can you hear it?
there are a couple of emotions that are really, really tricky, and we tend to shy away from them because they feel quite uncomfortable. And the two emotions that I'm talking about are confusion and frustration. But here's the thing, we've kind of got them arse about face, because actually confusion and frustration are signs that we are about to have a breakthrough if we can just stay in the feeling and not let feeling confused and feeling frustrated put us off and stop us from hanging on in there and making that breakthrough. Because when we're confused, when we're frustrated, it's a sign that our brain is learning. The synapses in our brain are really close to making a connection. And if we can just hang in there, they're going to make it. But so often we give up too soon because frustration and confusion aren't nice things to feel. And so it just gets too much and we give up just before those synapses meet and we make that connection. So let's do some tapping.
All right, so I'm gonna keep going just to the end where she says something else that is I believe really valuable.
Get excited about feeling frustrated. Get excited about feeling confused. They are great signs. And allow yourself to grow and learn.
We know that challenges need to be moderate. So if it's too difficult of a challenge, it will threaten the learner, and they will have to downshift their thinking, maybe not persist with that problem solving. Think of a time that something was much too difficult for you and you gave up. right? I can think of a time just this weekend. And even too easy a challenge, that, suppresses that opportunity for problem solving, and the learner kind of coasts into relaxation mode, right? So I can think of some times that, it was something was too easy, and I coasted. I'm sure you can think of one too. So learning, the big thing about it is learners need to be willing to take a risk and a leap into that unknown, and know that they will have support in reaching a new level of understanding. So we are asking students to trust us in that leap of faith, but they're only going to leap if they feel supported. So it's important to know also that it's normal to take risks, healthy risks, and to see adults modeling that. So what are some of those greatest life lessons that you learned because you persevered, right? So we all have that experience of that satisfaction of getting through an obstacle, right? That persevering through something, and the things that we learn from it. So, when oh, excuse me, that snuck up on me a little bit. So that, when a student wants to give up, but let's say it is, a moderate challenge, we have to connect with them. We have to validate that what they're feeling, that we understand, and that we, can push through that at times. So those connections really show that support. And we know as parents, we have that connection. But fostering that connection in the classroom, we really see that, especially with paras, and those support professionals that are much closer to our students in that way, for better or worse, right? And I love talking about fated support. So
Yeah. And if I can interject, I also think there's this stigma for our students with disabilities that they can't make mistakes, or mistakes are like I've seen it with my students that I help, like it's kind of a cushioned and not given the opportunity to make risks and make mistakes. But I love even the video of like remembering like that making mistakes and having frustration is a part of learning. And I feel like our kids don't, they're held to a higher standard than their peers that get to make mistakes all the time. But my child with disabilities can't make those mistakes. And so we at the ARC, we love supported risk. So just my soapbox that I'm gonna die on today. So you got it.
so we love our soapboxes. All right, so you may be familiar, with these terms, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So a lot of times we teach our students that, we need growth mindsets to be able to succeed, and that's not wrong. But a lot of times we forget to model that. And that, just because something doesn't work the first time, we have to persevere. And we have to use that knowledge to rework, reflect, and make that opportunity for growth. So I think we believe that that includes inviting students to take a role in their learning, and to have that desires to succeed. So that means, those student-led IEPs, a lot of those different things that we're talking about, that in order to have that growth mindset, we have to show students that we're willing to have a growth mindset as well. And that, we have to invite ourselves, into making that space more encouraging, for everyone. And I know a lot of parents in this room are willing to, fight for their kids, and know that that fight helps everyone. Because we know that when schools are better for students with disabilities, they're better for everyone. A lot of times, when we talk about accommodations and modifications, we hear, maybe even from students or like classmates, or sometimes even staff, that it's not fair. And boy, does that grind my gears. So it's really important to understand the difference between equality and equity. So I think that she does a great job of explaining, so I'm just going to let her do it.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabina with the Conscious Leadership Academy. Let's take a minute today to talk equity versus equality. I don't know if you've seen this image before, but this is a great representation of the difference between the two. What it all boils down to is need-based action and intention versus outcome. So equality is treating everyone the same no matter who they are or what their needs are. Your intention is to be fair on the front end. Equity is taking a person's needs and position into consideration so that everyone can have access to the same goals. This ensures that the possibility of outcomes are fair on the back end. So if we break down that picture again, we can see that by no fault of his own, the shorter person needs more in order to access the same goal of looking over the fence. The tall person already has access to this goal on his own. This can be likened to certain privileges we have in life. Some people have privileges that allow them to reach their goals with fewer obstacles. Due to the way our society is structured, other people may not have that same privilege. So let's take a minute to be mindful about equality and equity.
All right, so we're going to skip the mindfulness exercise, even though I love a good mindfulness exercise. I think at this point in the day, I might fall asleep. Okay, so
are there situations in life?
No, thank you. Okay, so we have that equity in the classroom. So I love this illustration even more than the baseball game, because I really think it shows how important this conversation is for everyone. That everyone in that classroom, including our students, are need different supports. So the supports for one student may not necessarily be the same for all, in all situations. So, a student who might need, full-time support from a behavioral support professional, RBT, or paraprofessional during unstructured activities such as recess, free play, or other free time, they might not need that support during a more structured activity such as circle time or class-wide instruction. So it really, not just the different supports for different kids, but different supports for different kids in different settings. So supports should, as we all know here, but I think this is something that I always want to say, especially in the school systems, is supports should never be determined by that disability label. And instead, supports should always be used when the instructional or social activity warrants the need for assistance. And we know that fair is not equal. So these are, just some things to think about when it comes to those accommodations and modifications. So I want to do, how much time do we have? Oh, we're actually doing pretty good. Okay. So we I want to read like a series of kind of rhetorical-ish questions. So if you want to drop some answers in the chat, feel free. I love a conversation. But if you just kind of want to like think about it, reflect about it, that's cool too. So do we learn more about our student by talking to them or by talking with them? So do students become independent learners by always being told what to do, or when they're taught how to use their independence through the classroom? Do students care about having choices, or do they want their choices made for them, when they're not interested, Do we tend to grow more when people create the ceiling for us, or when we decide our goals and where our ceilings of learning are? Are students more likely to work in a place that they took part in crafting the routines and that learning process? Or, when do students often feel like they're pieces on a board game being manipulated? Whether we're talking about that long-term school or just within the day with one lesson. So I think I'm skipping through our teacher specific stuff. So I want to also say that sorry, I'm just catching up on our chat. Oh, okay. So we know that the answers to these questions feel obvious at times, but it's also important to, go into each of these conversations about, what kinds of accommodations and modifications do we need with these in mind, right? So we really want to invite that student to co-create. Okay, so classroom instruction, should always facilitate that learning in an inclusive learning environment with accessible materials, positive attitude is necessary, and relevant adaptive teaching strategies. Without those things, it's not going to work. So classroom instruction should prescribe for the use of available educational strategies and assistive technologies, whatever that looks like, to all, to ensure equal participation. So we have these a lot of times for, just for students with disabilities, but allowing all students to use and learn and become comfortable with these tools can help facilitate a more inclusive classroom. So allowing all students the option to use flashcards to help with reading or computers to help with responses. If this is possible, allow those students. I mean, I know that this is not, this is usually a teacher decision, but coming into those meetings and saying, this is a great accommodation for my child, but this would be a great, best practice for all students. So those are a lot of things that teams can learn from the accommodation discussion. Instruction should provide flexibility to address those individual needs of students and construct that knowledge by connecting new ideas to existing ideas based on the materials or the activities. So it should include all students by providing those differentiated opportunities or those opportunities tailored to each student to demonstrate those learned skills. And it should ensure that participation of all students in play, games, social, cultural activities, whatever that looks like in the classroom. And instruction should create those opportunities for facilitated social interactions. So facilitated social interactions allow the student to learn and grow with each other. It gives them opportunities to learn about one another through the use of lessons, by giving them projects, games, and things that, include those multiple ways of learning. So I always encourage that, a lot of times when we're training teams, to really show what those facilitated social interactions look like, how to encourage that without dampening it is something that requires, a lot of practice and skill. All right, so where do we start? We keep expectations high, right? We want to make sure that we have great expectations for all students. So all of the tools and strategies that you use begin with the expectation that, and with research-based strategies for instruction and support, all students can work toward learn toward grade level academic conduct standards, and all but a small percentage of students with the most significant disabilities can achieve proficiency on those standards, and that's something that we see. So we have to keep those expectations high for all, because that is the least dangerous assumption. So there is no magic bullet. This goal cannot be met with any one strategy or one way of support alone. In other words, there's no magic bullets. So it will take a combination of everything you learn and know about the student. And collaboration is key. So each student's unique set of accommodations should be understood and supported by all school personnel involved with a student. So including general and special education teachers, paraeducators, the job by many names. So we might hear them called paraprofessionals, aides, instructional assistants, lots of different, names for them. And a lot of other support staff like speech clinicians, school psychologists, and all of the different therapists that I'm sure a lot of our students interact with at least on a weekly basis. So everyone on that team needs to be collaborating on what those accommodations and modifications look like, not just the goals and the PLEPs. Or the plops, I forget. Okay, so they need to be student-centered, right? So the tendency may be to recommend a wide variety of accommodations, and sometimes they cast that wide net saying the more accommodations, the better, or at least something will help. But a student, you know, this is a hit or miss approach. And it doesn't necessarily enhance a student's access to learning. So every student with a disability does not need an accommodation, nor do all students with the same disability need the same accommodations. So the ultimate decision about whether to use an accommodation rests on each student specifically and his or her preferences and abilities, right? So we want to make sure that we are choosing things intentionally and we are growing from there, because we want to make sure that the accommodations and modifications that we're choosing are effective and they're student-centered. So a lot of times we, say so many different things that work and we just throw them all in, but we have to make sure we're intentional about it. And last is thinking across settings. So an accommodation that a student needs in one class, or maybe even just a transition period between classes, might not be the same thing they need at recess. It might not be the same thing they need in ELA or at dismissal time. So it's going to be different in different settings. Okay, I think this is my last one before I toss it over to Tierra. I know I'm very long-winded. All right, so choosing and using accommodations for things that IEP teams should be talking about. So, you always want to make sure you start with the standards. So make sure the team knows what all the students at that grade level are expected to know and to be able to do. I think that is the most important thing, to understand what the broadest expectations are. So then you can examine the students' learning strengths and challenges in light of each standard. So what kinds of instructional strategies work best for that student? Maybe visual, tactile, auditory, a combination, right? So what learning strategies, have worked before? So maybe I do, you do, we do, which is a method of modeling things for students and gradually releasing that responsibility to the student. Or another fancy one called dual coding, which I'm sure we all do, where we combine words and visuals to support multiple representations of that information. So what different learning strategies have worked before? What are the accommodations that have increased that students' access to instruction and assessment? What's worked in the past, and in what situations? What are some of the challenges of providing a student's preferred accommodation, and how can they be overcome? Are there ways to improve the student's current use of an accommodation, or are there other accommodations that the student should try instead? And most importantly, what does the student prefer? Because an accommodation doesn't mean much if the student doesn't use it. So how can the student learn to request a preferred accommodation and build that self-advocacy? Are there ways that the student can use preferred accommodations outside of school, like at home, or if they're, at transition age, maybe on the job, or anywhere in the community? So, and does the student still need an accommodation? We see a lot of times as students age, they bring their accommodations with them from many, many years ago, and they tend to just accumulate. So do they need it anymore? And then a lot of testing and accountability in terms of, are those accommodations allowed on state and district assessments, for accountability? Are there opportunities for the student to use preferred accommodations on practice tests? And what arrangements need to be made in order for those accommodations to be available in assessment situations? And how can they be documented? So these are all a lot of questions to ask at teams, but it's a great way to really be critical with one another on whether accommodations, I mean, not with one another, but with the process, and making sure that those accommodations are student-centered and intentional. All right. I think that's it for me for a minute. Tierra, I'm passing it off to you, friend.
Thank you. I just want to say that the tech demons are after my computer because it is very pixelated. So bear with me. I've got but I can't restart it. So here we are, and I'm going to give you what I have. I'm putting in the chat a link to the Northern the Northern Kentucky Cooperative for Educational Services. They have an amazing training packet with 26 pages of examples of adaptations and modifications that can be used for specific situations. And so I put the link to that just so you can go to it. It's free. Save it to your computer. It's a wonderful tool to brainstorm and even to plan lessons with. And that is a resource for our teachers, but also I think it's helpful because I get to talk about the concrete and the examples of adaptations and modifications that you can use while studying and homework. So all of these things can be used over different settings. But that is an excellent resource that we share with everybody. And then I put that in chat. Okay. Thanks, Eleni. Sorry, I'm just trying to read my pixelated notes. So we get to talk about how some examples of some things that we can put specifically related to like specific subjects. So we're going to just go on a list of, boom, here's our resources. And these will be in the PowerPoint, but we'll also, if Eleni is cool with it, adding stuff to the chat just because some of these are some weird names. So when it comes to English and language arts, listening to audiobooks or using speech-to-text software, like, please say it, Eleni, it's a mythical animal. We have to say it like Donkey from Shrek.
It's Pericles.
Pericles.
So I'm gonna work on fixing that link. It seems like it's not working, so I'm gonna try to find a fresh one and get that in there. If not, I'll make sure that it's available to be sent out with the follow-up information tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
I could have
apologize.
copied it wrong too because my computer's acting up.
This is like the third web page that's gone missing on me this week.
Okay. So we love audiobooks and speech to text software like Pericles. The cool thing about Pericles is you can download it to Google or your web browser, and it reads your web browser related content to you. So like your emails, your PDFs, websites, all of those things, it'll read to you. So that's just a way to accommodate. There are apps like Hoopla and Libby, which are related to, if you have a library card, you have access to ebooks, audiobooks, magazines, CDs, all of these things available in your library right through an app on your phone. And a huge one is, it's not on here, but a huge one that we love is the Free Library of Philadelphia, which if you have any English or Spanish speaking kids or students, they have a lot of ebooks and audiobooks and stuff in Spanish. So it's in different languages. So it's a huge free resource to find audiobooks and stuff for our students. We also can do and you only have to be a resident of, it's free and you only have to be a resident of PA. So that's a cool thing. You can do it online. Reading with a word window or in large print, where we can wow, what am I trying to say?
Isolate?
Yeah, like you're blocking out all the other words so that you just see the words in the window.
Love it. Thank you guys, because I don't know why that word was not coming. I'm like, you know what I'm saying, but I can't say the word. Yes, isolate and thank you so much, Deb. To be able to isolate words and phrases, these are huge. That's one recommendation we gave to one of our students with they go to school at a career technical institution and they have a lot of high level language. So we're like, let's try word windows to see if that helps him concentrate and be able to focus on things. You can do adaptive stories in simplified language. Sherlock Center has an amazing resource for free adaptive stories and simplified language stories. So Eleni's going to throw all of that in the chat. You can use books with repetitive text. Reading with peers is super huge. Our kids and their peers are such a cool tool. Not only does it promote belonging and acceptance with their peers, but most of them are so willing to help and want to know their classmates. And so peer support is so huge. And then I am a AI lover here, so I'm gonna just throw out ChatGPT and Rewordify, which are free websites as long as you have an email that you can literally give it a prompt. Like, we're working on a group, and so we're talking about the word dexterity. Can you explain dexterity to me like you're talking to a 5-year-old in one word? And it's amazing. It will give you so many options. So it's an amazing way to use to level text. I tell it to talk to me like I'm a 3rd grader all the time, because I feel like that's my best understanding stuff. That's the best grade I can understand stuff at. And it does all the work for you. And it's really great. And so that's English.
I'm a huge fan of ChatGPT. We just used it today. Tierra and I were on a meeting where we were like putting some stuff together. I was like, all right, how do we frame this conversation about friendship boundaries in a way that is appropriate for high schoolers? You know, and it does that. And I think one of the best things is when we're talking about, you know, adapting text, it is time consuming to make text into different language, different levels, or plain language. But with ChatGPT, you can literally take a digital textbook, copy and paste the whole thing, paste it in there and say, convert this into a 2nd grade reading level or Lexile, whatever number it is. And it will do it. And it is fantastic.
It's amazing. I love it so much. And then, sorry, I want to read the chat, but I can't. Let me, can you read it?
I sure can. We have some big ChatGPT fans in the chat.
Love it.
And Laura says that she tried to use it to see if she could make a context clue practice, and it was awesome until I realized it made all of the answers B. So it's funny because I always say with ChatGPT, it's a great place to start, but you have to double check it.
Yeah, that's fair.
It can get a little
great
goofy.
example. So let's move on to math, some specific supports for math. So I know that having our students and our kids learn how to do fractions on paper is like, that's a skill that we want to learn. The calculators are amazing. And now a lot of people have phones and they're super available. And so maybe it's just using a calculator. Because I think when I go out and I pay a tip, I know how to put the tip formula in the calculator, but I'm not going to do the formula myself. I want the calculator to do it, and it's quicker. And so it's just thinking about those accommodations and modifications. Touch math is another great one. And that's where you have like a pad, and each number has a corresponding set of dots that represent it. An excellent way to accommodate and modify. Flashcards, we talked about it earlier. Gonna preach it. Flashcards are amazing. You can find them in multiple subjects. Everyone benefits from flashcards. Manipulatives, not multiples. Manipulatives like Unifix cubes, which I believe we'll put in the chat too. Counting chips, different size cubes, numbered dice. We were even talking about earlier, there are now things for fractions where they put like fraction puzzles together, but it helps them learn fractions. So just different ways we can connect them to the material. And also visual representation is going to be your best friend. So you want to use charts, graphs, all of those things. Another huge resource we love for math is called PhotoMath. It is free to download, and a lot of the core features for the program are free, but there are some things you do have to pay for, but the basics are free. Which reinforce concepts learned in the classroom. You can check homework assignments. It's accelerated, or it's individual learning based, or accelerates by the individual learning. It's an app and a website, and you can learn any level math. It gives you step-by-step explanations for every math problem, allows you to practice math problems at your own pace, checks homework, and helps you study for upcoming quizzes and tests. So we definitely recommend that a lot. And sorry, I saw the chat, but Eleni, sorry. If you see anything super huge, please throw that out there, because it's
I'll stop
really
you, don't worry.
wild. Okay. Physical education. So we love our specials, and physical education is, I don't know about you guys, but I have some very intense memories from school related to physical education. There's a sense of belonging, a team, like we want our kids to be included in physical education. And so whether that is getting adaptive equipment through grips or different shapes, different sizes, silent activities, like there is a game called Silent Ball. And the only thing, like for our kids with or overstimulated sensory issues, not issues, sensory, the word not, that's not issues. But the whole game is basically a ball game that's silent. And that's a way to play, have physical sport. But thank you, Susan, sensory needs. Just a way to adapt and modify for them. The choice of activities, we love giving our kids choice. It's great for self-advocacy. So giving them the choice of activities, it helps with engagement. Those are so cool. Changing the size or location of the court. So instead of having why would you have a huge gym for kindergartens? Like, let's cut the gym and use tape to make a smaller court so that they can get up and down the court easily. Partners, again, peer support is going to be your best friend. And then also not allowing our kids to pick the teams, which again, horror stories of PE of being picked last or assuming I can't do something. And so just having randomized teams, or, like the teachers know their children. And so who would work best together. Those are great things. And then we're going to talk about art. Love it. The choice of materials, size, pre-cut materials. We have a student who would literally just melt in behaviors when he had to grip a pen in art to do coloring. And so, but we saw him light up when they had to make a tree and they used like colored tissue paper to make an autumn tree. And so he loved that. He was super engaged. So a recommendation was to use an iPad to use the touch color option as a way. He's still coloring, he's still doing the task that you want him to do. It's just modified to a behavior that helps him be engaged and helps him with his sensory needs.
Yeah, and that was even just one of the recommendations. We had a couple of recommendations to, open up that possibility for when they're just coloring and waiting their turn to do the project. Let that be a flexible material, whether it's bingo dotters or stickers or whatever that coloring can look like. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're okay. Also, you helped me look at time, so I'm gonna go quickly. Stencils, slant boards, adaptive scissors, I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Tech Out is an amazing resource for assistive tech. I believe it's free, or they help with funding to residents of PA. They are amazing at printing, or 3D printing. Like, they are an amazing resource. They have like assistive tech libraries for you to be able to try stuff out. like they're an amazing resource for assistive tech. Smocks or aprons with pockets or gloves. Some kids have sensory needs. They don't like to touch wet, cold stuff. Protection. We like protection. And then even posted steps to the activity. We'll talk about on the next slide, but there's another app, Google Chrome app called Scribble, where you literally can just record a tutorial on how to do stuff on your computer, and then you have a link to send it, and it's just another visual tutorial to show your kids. Science, hands-on experience, getting the multiple learning styles in there. Teacher demonstration, posted steps indicating the process. So we're gonna oh no, Scribe is here. So yeah, it's a Chrome extension, and it just helps you make sure tutorials.
Do you want me to explain quick, or do you just want to keep on keeping on?
You can explain quickly, and then I'm going to keep on keeping on.
Okay, so basically all it does is it records the computer screen as you're completing a task, and every time you click or hover, it records that action, so that at the end of you doing whatever that task is, it says, well, we noticed that you did this, this, and this, and here's the screenshots of each. And then you can kind of adjust them a little bit, and then you can print that out or send it as a PDF for people to use to do consistent things. So this is Scribe. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the Chrome extension link.
Thanks, Eleni. We're gonna go to social studies, and I forgot to say this earlier. A lot of these suggestions that we have are things you might already have, low cost or free. So just to keep that in mind, like accommodating and modifying isn't expensive. It's just being you keep creatively thinking through what you have to work with what you have. So with social studies, highlighters are so well, are they cheap anymore? We get them free, so they're cheap, but they're like really inexpensive. Highlighting tape, there is amazing things. Ways to connect the content to the person. Videos, visuals, maps, a written task card, which is a card with a step-to-step process on it. Again, cheap, low cost, it just takes some creativity. Sorry, Eleni, I'm gonna go because of the time. We're gonna go to music. So a great accommodation and modification is songs in the student's native language. For example, at church, I teach children's class. We learned a student was known to have really bad behaviors, but we found out that she just doesn't like English isn't her first language. So when she's just frustrated because she can't communicate what she's trying to say. So we started doing songs in Spanish. We started giving supplemental stuff in Spanish to help, and her changed as soon as she was able to communicate. So that's encouraging to it. Instruments, signs when singing, rhythm to clapping out, MP3s or CD of music. Well, I guess it'd be MP3s because do people still have CDs? But that's my thing. So that's a bias. Sorry. MP3s or CDs of music to practice at home. Even just YouTube is an amazing thing. There's so much material. You can literally find a song in a specific key with like all the lyrics that you can send home to your youth. So just knowing what your resources are. So accommodations and modifications for paper and pencil. Again, we have highlighters, we have marked text paper, color coding, and whiteout. All of these will be extremely helpful for specifically pointing out tasks. Another example, we have a youth, the teacher did not want him to use the words like do not. It had to be positive. So we color coded those things that he could not use red. The words he could use is green, and just another way to help him engage and be able to point out the things that he needed to happen on that worksheet.
Another one I like to suggest for this is labels or stickers, custom stickers. So a lot of times students who are still working on, handwriting or a whole variety of tasks, it allows to that independence, so that especially if students are given a word bank, like if the rest of the class has a word bank, put that word bank on labels for that student so that they can, take that label that, they can take that sticker and stick it onto those, fill in the blank with whatever that is. But labels are a really great paper pencil task accommodation as well. And like we said, as long as it matches the expectation, it's an accommodation.
Eleni, just so I
Yes.
can leave time for a question because we're really close. I think
Sure,
I'm
yeah.
going to go ahead and skip to the 10 tips to make each student
Okay.
great. I appreciate it. And this is just a general reminder of why we do accommodations. Just that to remember that each child is, whoa, sorry. My computer just went really crazy.
Uh-oh, is it glitching?
Yes.
Do you want me to just run through these?
Thank you.
I
Thank
got
you
you.
so much. I don't know what's going
We're having
on.
a Tech Tuesday. It is Tuesday, right?
I
Yeah.
don't
Okay. So 10 things to just remember as we go is, each child is like all other children, but each child is different from all other children. And that children need that unconditional acceptance as human beings. They need to make their own sense of things and are more able to do that when adults collaborate. Children need action, joy, and peace. Children need to believe that they can become better than they are today. And children need help living up to their dreams. And children need power over their learning and to learn how to use that power wisely. And children need to feel secure over their larger world. And children need adults to see their strengths. So none of these should come as surprises. And sometimes we might need to bring some of these in as reminders for the rest of our IEP teams to kind of bring everyone together and make sure that everyone is working towards that same goal, towards this, or that will, give that student the opportunity to achieve. So, all right, I think, well, that's so much more boring than our usual thank you slide. But if you want to look at those sources, there they are. I'm going to stop sharing. We have a couple minutes left. If anyone has any questions, we're here for it.
Thank you so much for that information. It was definitely wonderful. I like the 10 tips. Very helpful with that. So thank you again. I'm going to end the recording.